Hello and welcome to the Ea Tolkien Society monthly society meeting. This is March 19th, 2022. That's a lot of twos. Of course, the two twos was when it was
It'd be
February
22.
22nd.
Yes. They tried to make me wear a tutu at school.
Oh, did they?
All the other teachers did. Instead, I wore I made a paper crown with the twos on it.
Okay.
I said, I'm wearing two.
I would have used if we could find a bunch of $2 bills.
What kind of school did you go to?
Oh,
Northwest Christian.
yeah, no, I mean, it's a private school, but when you work with mostly women, they don't think that would be an issue. I'm one of only like 2 male teachers, right? So most of them are their ideas for what, Anyway, I don't want to get up on that right now.
Welcome.
Yes.
We'll go through your minutes and everything, then I want to talk about the RPG Center because that affects the Tolkien Society meeting, starting probably next month if all goes well. So, but let's go ahead and do a roll call of who all is here and then do the meeting minutes if you would, sir.
Hi, I'm Brian, secretary of this here Smile in the wilds of Spokane, Washington. And we are glad to welcome the rest of you. So let's move to our online guests today, and then we'll come back to the table.
Let's start with you. Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Cooperstein. I've been attending for the last 10 years, last couple of years on and off, mostly off virtually. Live in the next metropolis south from Spokane in the Tri-Cities.
3 boroughs.
You go Tri-Cities and Metropolis?
Chris, I've been to Tri-Cities. It's not a metropolis.
Oh, it's Who on the Hound.
It's approaching 400,000 people.
Oh, wow.
And they keep building, and the building is not stopping. I mean, Spokane and Spokane Valley is pretty static, but on the Idaho side, it's been going like gangbusters, and it's like that here.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Spokane
Absolutely.
is a very anti-growth group, big group, very powerful.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Good to have you. And here's our other online guest.
This is Gary, and I'm over here in Mountain Home, Idaho. And I'm seeing the growth over here, and it's out of sight. Even in Mountain Home, which is, the only place it's got to offer is a Air Force base. And I'm trying to figure out why they would move to Tri-Cities, because you're in the same state as a lot of people escaping.
That'd be because Chris has a job he had to move to,
Yeah, work.
Work related.
Oh, work related. Okay, well, I'm retired. I guess I'm the eldest of the group, and
We recognize you as elder.
I don't have that problem anymore.
I didn't for a while. I was semi-retired. Raised my kids. So that was nice. That was a good.
You go fully retired, and that's.
Yeah. Well,
If you want to figure out what you want to do, it's great.
Yeah, no, that's what it was. I got to, besides focusing on raising my kids, I got to do what I wanted to do until Obamacare really bankrupted. Yeah. And I had to go back to work. But otherwise, I'd still be retired.
And I think, Gary, you were of all of us, you read The Lord of the Rings first. So that's great to have your insight and your experience, and to kind of connect with what it was like when you would be reading it within the author's lifetime. Is something, of course, we can't do.
No. But yeah, it's just, well, the first Tolkien work I read, of course, was The Hobbit, where I told everybody how I was introduced to it when I was going to the University of Wisconsin. And then several years later in the Air Force, I picked up a copy of, in fact, I think it was a paperback copy of Lord of the Rings, and read the thing from cover to cover, and was just enthralled with it. I'm not a big fantasy fan or sci-fi fan. My wife is a sci-fi fan, But anyway, it's completely unknown genre and really surprised me.
Yeah, prior to a friend insisting I read The Hobbit, I was mostly like nonfiction and like horse stories, fiction. I was big into horses, all the Walter Farley stuff because I was riding and training horses. And well, probably like 30 something books.
Island Stallion is the best.
Yeah. But he insisted I read The Hobbit, and I loved it, and that broke me into the fantasy world. And then within a few years, I'd read everything that was published and some that wasn't published. If you went to, as far as like, if you went to the B. Dalton or Walden Books bookstore, the fantasy section, there wasn't. I was always waiting for the next book to come out because I'd read everything that was there. That's how small the fantasy section was back then.
And we have
in the 70s.
We have some more guests at the table. This is Mortimer.
Mort. No, it's not Mortimer. It's just Mort.
Just Mort.
It's
Mort's
the,
Dartour? No, not even.
all of those could be references, but remember, this is Katie.
Oh.
What is her favorite fantasy setting
Wait.
and author?
Hold on. It would be the Discworld, Terry Pratchett.
Yes, Terry Pratchett and Discworld.
Ah.
So Mort was the apprentice to death.
Oh.
Oh, that's a groaner.
That's yeah. He was this peasant that was made to go become an apprentice to death.
Well, this is a much nicer.
Yes. Well, no, Mort was a very nice guy.
Okay. Well, this Mort is a more silent type,
Yes.
and has fewer Tolkien comments to make.
Yes.
But
he was very sweet.
But to my right, your left is.
Hello. I'm Anthony of the East Farthing. The only growth I hope to see in this part of the world is long bottom leaf, old Toby.
Ah, here.
Finest weed.
May the hair on your toes never fall out.
And finally, our founder, Hawk Robinson, who exists on all 9 planes at once.
Yeah, I know.
Forgive me. Let me see.
That'd be the other plane. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started with reading the notes for February Tolkien Society. So if you're watching online, pull up your chair and rest back a minute, and we're just going to go over what we talked about last month. So I'll just bring those up. And then typically what we do for our meetings is that after we read the notes from the last month, we usually have kind of any new, interesting, maybe news in the last month that relates to J.r.r. Tolkien, his works, anything in the pop culture, whatever that people want to talk about. And then we usually kind of do some things every month. We almost always read a letter by Tolkien. We've been using our way through chronologically, and we're now into the late 1950s, I think. Maybe we're almost to 19. So reading through those and any conversations or discussions that kind of bounce off of that. And we typically have also, at least in the last several months, we've been kind of, just to make it more interesting, comparing Tolkien to a different author each month. And we started with the most recent ones, kind of those who were influenced by Tolkien, either positively or perhaps in contrast to him. More on that later. So, but we'll go ahead and read the notes if that sounds good. So we met last time on February 19th, and we had Hawk, and then online Brian, Gary, Chris, and Sarah. So Hawk was the only one who was actually in the studio. Or maybe you were in our studio for online.
Yes,
exactly.
It was a reversal.
There you go. But anyway, we all were able to. Wonders of modern technology continue to meet, which was great. And I read the January notes. And Hawk gave an update on the community center. It was wonderful. And Hawk's going to give us a further update in just a moment. Big news. So that's for Hawk's
segment.
Yep, his segment and his nonprofit, which is rpgresearch.com. I showed the One Ring 2nd edition role-playing game just arrived. And how excited I was about that, and I can't wait. So we get started. We do need to get started. So, and actually, just side note, last week, Hawk was gracious enough to allow me to run a session with,
You were gracious enough to do it.
and just kind of basically as part of the training. And again, I don't want to get into Hawk's side thing, but really just kind of helping to use Tolkien role playing in Middle Earth as a means to help people through recreational therapy. So, but again, Hawk can expand on that later. And then we had a big discussion of Amazon's Rings of Power trailer. Remember when we didn't know what the name was going to be? We just called it Amazon Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, LOTR on Prime.
Right, LOTR on Prime. Thank you. But of course, the big reveal in January, and Hawk referenced this, the really beautiful
Practical effects.
practical effects, really amazing. But the Rings of Power, right? And so the trailer had just dropped really days before our meeting, so that we spent a lot of time on this. And then we basically, each of us, we're not allowed to play the YouTube video here, but all of us have seen it. And then each of us kind of shared briefly what we thought about it. Kind of first blush, what was our initial kind of I don't even want to say the word reaction, because I think it's so often that's unhelpful, but definitely our first insights on what is this show, what does it not show. So Sarah or Sarah in Italy, she appreciated the posters actually more than the trailer and was a bit disappointed by the trailer. Gary shared that it depends on what the series is going to be like, and the controversy really kind of revolves. It's very interesting, Gary. We'll get into this after the notes, but at that point, just the things that you had shared were okay. There's this controversy about races of people. Is there bigotry in the original work? Something Michael Martinez has spoken on actually before at length. Social justice. Oh my! And the quotation I got from you, Gary, was, and this was actually, I believe, you quoted from, if it wasn't Tolkien, it was from something which was supporting that in the past, which is that evil can create anything new. It can only pervert what is already made, which is a great quote.
That is Tolkien, I believe.
Thank you. And then it was the also the thing that you may have heard a lot on the internet, get woke, get broke. Anyway, so you were just like expressing some early apprehension, we'll put it that way. Chris has mixed feelings. Cinematography of an advertisement is what you said, which is kind of what it was, because it was a Super Bowl ad. So we have to kind of put it in context. Hawk, big and expansive for the second age, bigger than the third age, Lord of the Rings and Hobbit. But even though there's so much scope there, kind of disappointing as a trailer, no meat. None the wiser about what they're going to actually be doing. Told us really nothing. A lot of CGI. Wish they gave snippets of story. And then I didn't really kind of share my point of view, kind of sitting on the fence, but I did read what I felt were helpful. Hello, Mort. Hello. There's a dog under the table. But finding some helpful quotations from the Vanity Fair interview that I felt at least gave some perspective on what the producers were seeking to do, because obviously, again, one cannot judge everything from a trailer. Anyway, and then the big question we all agreed on is it true to the spirit of Tolkien's story? Because that's what we care about here at Tolkien Scholars or Ea Tolkien Society. Is it true to the spirit of Tolkien's story? Because that's what we care about. And then we moved to a discussion of fantasy author Ursula okay, I'm going to say this correctly because Hawk. You too.
Yes.
Not him again. It's the word nerd. He always gets the words right. Oh, my word shaman here.
Not shaman.
Yeah, okay. Well, stop shaming me, would you? Anyway, but yeah, so we've got a little friendly rivalry here about things like, is it Bjorn or Beorn?
Beorn.
Yes. Well, it depends. If you're Anglo-Saxon or Nordic. Anyway, I digress. Yes. So the question, it had to do with Ursula Le Guin and j.r.r. Tolkien. How did the fantasy? Well, I think she's still alive. How does the fantasy author? She passed away. Ursula K. Le Guin, who is a more recent generation, find her roots, or how do we maybe perceive that? And we found several. We talked, just to be brief, about the way in which language creates the world And while Le Guin was not on the same par as Tolkien as far as a philologist, say that 5 times fast, it is true that she took very seriously words and their meanings. And if you know the true name of things, you can control them. Although that also is an interesting theme that she deals with, which is that if you seek to know the name of something just to control it and dominate it, that too is empty. So it has to do with this idea of knowing the name of things in order to use them well or thrive. And that's interesting. She kind of represents a little bit more progressive, of course, and from a feminist point of view, but very sympathetic to Tolkien. And then we read letter 197, in which j.r.r. Tolkien discusses income and how he's actually quite glad for the sales of The Lord of the Rings, because after all, he is only a humble Oxford Don. Back then, they weren't pulling in the big figures, because remember, this is just after the war, and if I remember rightly, they didn't have bananas until the 1950s, because they were things were really, really tight. Paper shortage as well, yeah. And then we actually had enough time to read letter 198. And then we talked about how the next month it would be nice to see if Hawk was able to get a hold of C.J. Sheriff, who's a local Spokane fantasy author. And we planned that if that is not possible, or if, for example, by some stroke of coincidence, Hawk becomes slammed and swamped by maybe moving everything to a new site, then we would instead discuss Michael Moorcock, which is what we will then default to today. And there's a New Yorker article which is in the notes, which is very helpful. And then we also talked about Tolkien Moot in July, which is coming up this summer. That is a role-playing con, a very small convention just here, and it is about
Small for now.
Small for
but
now.
We don't ever want to get
kind of like Hobbits in the Shire. But anyway, it can get bigger, but it's all about role-playing in Middle Earth.
How many guests was it? A gross?
Yes, it was a gross.
We should keep Tolkien.
I agree.
Never go large.
Yes, I agree.
How much is
144.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes. You should
That's
never
right.
use that term
For
about
people.
which is why I was seen as very
uncouth
by Bilbo.
Yeah, but I think that should be our guideline.
Agreed. And then we concluded by saying that we would be meeting next month, which it is today. My notes are respectfully submitted.
Thank you, Sir Secretary.
Oh, yes.
Yes. All right.
Wasn't that good? It was all right. It was terrible. No, it was horrible. Boo, boo,
boo.
Little Statler Waldorf there.
Indeed. Katie's favorite curmudgeons. She's always aspired to be a curmudgeon because of them.
And there are two of you. Always two there. A master and apprentice. But which one?
My two hands of blue. It's heredity. All right. So, a little tidbit before we jump into all the Tolkien-esque stuff, because it does affect Tolkien and Tolkien Moot. I did 2 weeks ago finally get to sign the lease.
Yay! Woo-hoo! Huzzah!
Huzzah!
And sign language for fear.
Yeah.
I'm now on a 3-year lease on a pretty large chunk of property in the city. Yeah, I am the guarantor for the nonprofit, because the nonprofit doesn't earn enough.
That's sobering, isn't it?
Yeah, anything on me. So
On the other hand, this means that Hawk shall be here in Spokane for the next 3 years. Huzzah! Yay!
So this will be the RPG Center, and I believe we have a summary. Let me see if rpgcenter.org. Why is my screen slow? So the website, anyway, rpgresearch.com is the best place to, for now, get updates. YouTube.com/RPG Research and Twitter.com/RPG Research. I've been uploading photos and videos of the major construction going on, because so there are 2 buildings on this lot. It's a pretty good sized lot. I guess it's like a 16th of a city block or something. It has 2 buildings, building A and building B. The easternmost, actually, maybe I can screen share here, because this is going to affect all of us for our meetings and Tolkien Moot and all of that.
And for the sake of the notes, I'll need the address.
101 North Stone Street.
101
1 North Stone Street.
very binary of you.
Yeah.
Wait, what number is that in binary?
Let's see. So that's
Chris, what is that? 101?
1, 2, 4. So 5. Is that 5? Uh-oh. Oh. Because we moved servers, we can't actually get to the RPGresearch.com web server from here.
Oh, I was trying to get on it.
Yeah, they should be able to. You guys should be able to get to RPGresearch.com. Because our server's here in the house, and Nicholas has done some stuff with the network and unfortunately broke some stuff with the move. You can't get to it from here, but you can from elsewhere.
It's almost like a Palantir.
So what I will do is
101 North Stone Street.
I will jump with my laptop to another network and join this through the DSL because I think that will let me. Anyway, there are 2 buildings. One is Building A, which is the easternmost, and one is Building B, which is the westernmost. Building A is interesting in that it's from the late 1800s, either 1889 or 1898. We keep getting different numbers from websites and people and city things. But late 1800s, very late 1800s. It was a farmhouse, a 4-room farmhouse, and then it's got a little kitchen breezeway space and a little walk breezeway space and 1 closet and an add-on bathroom. They probably have now.
Remind me later, because I'd be happy to go to the courthouse or to the get the deed or the.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. That would.
What's the zip code on that, Hawk? Do you have that?
99202.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've had to know all. I've had to talk to the city division so much that's contractor.
What are you calling the whole property? What are you calling that?
We are calling it the RPG Center. Because it will consist of RPG Research Headquarters, our broadcast studio, the RPG Community Center, and the RPG Museum. So the whole lot is the RPG Center. It seems to be the easiest way to remember.
Okay, so it's the broadcast studio, the RPG museum, the community center, and the headquarters, and
For
then
RPG.
What is that again in say NATO phonetics? It's Romeo Papa Golf Center?
Yes, as in role-playing game. This is
That's
all
what
about
I thought, and I went there and they said the domain's up for sale.
.org. .org.
Oh, ORG, okay.
Yeah, we're a non-profit organization. Yeah, no, that wouldn't work.
really.
Somebody else owns
That was
Cyber
my
Squad.
mistake.
What's that?
I said that was my mistake.
No, it's okay. I'm not sure I clarified, but rpgcenter.org or just rpgresearch.com because it's all under the.
That's the reason why there's a.
Yes.
So say the 2 websites again.
rpgresearch.com is the company, nonprofit. The short for the facility is rpgcenter.org.
Center ER, correct? ER?
Yes, yeah,
Not
not
RE.
British.
We're not-
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Anything else to
And you
add to
can
that?
view videos of the construction at youtube.com/RPG Research and twitter.com/RPG Research. Because there's a massive amount of construction. I filled up all 4 of my phones with photos and video just this week.
Well, so what kind of
Yeah,
briefly,
okay.
what kind of
So
changes have you made?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So
Start yourself
the
in.
building B is a 2-story building, about 1,000 square feet per floor, and then building A is around 900 square feet. And then there's a 50 by 50 parking lot, a fenced parking lot with 6. Building A, as I said, is from the late 1800s. It's 4 rooms. That's going to be the museum space. It's probably going to take us the better part of a year to make that usable. The previous tenants, unfortunately, apparently were like crackheads. Crashed the place. They had cats. Place you couldn't go in there without a safety mask, like a double filter.
Drugs and
It was bad. Could not go in there, and so I've been spraying it and airing it out, and spraying it and airing it out. And then we're getting there, and it's got the old original wood floors, so they're all a little uneven. But if you sand them and stain them and stuff, they'll be nice.
no plans
other
for a
than-
tavern in there, are there?
No,
Only
anything to do with liquor licensing. We don't want to talk.
Oh, yeah, we
Yeah, I've got a sander stainer that will person that was reasonable that did our house. So I'll email that to you.
Everything like that's probably either if it's not able to be done by volunteers, it'll have to be donated because we have no money. All of it's going to be going into rent at this point. So the nice thing is the landlord, because this is such a distressed property, we're only paying $1,500 a month for this entire lot.
He's tickled that you're there.
Yeah.
He wants us, yeah. He's really excited by what we're doing. He's grown up in the neighborhood. He's a local, and he's really glad to see what we're bringing to the first year will be $1,500, the second year will be $2,000, the third year will be $2,500. But what he really wants is if he can figure out a way in the taxes to donate it, or if that doesn't work out, at least give us first right of refusal and the ability to buy it as inexpensive as possible. So he's been trying to keep anything he does to it to a minimum so that it doesn't have to pass the cost through to us, and then we just do what we can. So we're really, really, really going to need our volunteers and the community to donate a lot. There's no heat, there's no air conditioning. Rear building, front building, there's spaceport. No air conditioning. So there's a lot of work to do.
You arrange a time for a tour, and I will get.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I've been down there every day since I signed the lease 2 weeks ago. And volunteers have been coming and going at different times. Since we didn't have working plumbing yet, I was bringing my trailers down, which have their own bathrooms and kitchen and living room and all of that, so that something. Also, it was so cold
Okay.
as well. Anyway, so the older building will be appropriately the museum. It'll be a small museum, but a museum where you should give me advice on this because you would know more. We're thinking about taking out 2 of the walls that we don't think are load bearing to open it up. Right now, it's 4 very small rooms.
Yeah.
Versus 2 larger spaces.
There's 2 ways of thinking about that.
Yeah, because we're not restoring them.
No, absolutely not. It has more to do with what's going to help create the best
Flow for the museum. Exactly.
But also, flow is not only like traffic, because it's not going to be probably
Feng shui.
and it's also probably not going to be a large number
It's
of
not.
traffic.
We're only talking 900 square feet.
So
of
you're
space.
really going to focus on atmosphere.
Yeah.
And that I think
And it's going to be lined with books. All of this stuff will be wall to wall to wall with books. And then we've got to try to make some sort of in the middle, like make it interactive in some ways.
Yes, four rooms gives you more wall space.
That's what I was thinking too, Chris.
Well, right, but then they're so small. There's no space in the middle. And then the problem is you get traffic. Right, there's no way in and out. Everybody will be bumping each other at the doorway, and
Possibly
versus having 2
I think
doors.
it's really hard.
You just need some bookshelf secret doors.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, I guess I need to get down there and have a look.
Yeah, quickly.
Okay.
No, it's going to take us a year on that build.
Yeah.
So we've got time on that. So
You're
we're working on
getting
it.
B operational first, kind of.
Building B is going to be operational first. It already is. We did our first broadcast last week. So
Good
Building
job.
B was built in 1992. It was really built more as a 2-story warehouse that was kind of being turned into an office space, but they never finished it.
Oh.
So the plumbing is just stubbed. There are no appliances down, no fixtures downstairs, and upstairs there's just a toilet. There's a jacuzzi tub sitting there, not hooked up, brand new in the plastic. A sink not hooked up, which also looks damaged, and a toilet that's hooked up, but we can't tell if it ever worked because there was never actually a sewer or anything, and it was never hooked up.
So
And
we
there's
don't
no
have a
water.
working bathroom there?
Not yet. That's why we had to use the trailers.
Right.
That's why I bring the trailers down because they work.
Okay.
The bathroom, there's one bathroom in the old house, but the pipes have been spraying. They're burst and such.
Oh.
They say major fixer upper.
So what we really need to define, you're saying, Hawk, is a plumber who is a lifetime super fan
Of Tolkien.
and gaming. That's what you're saying, right?
Sure, that would be
Okay,
great.
Easy.
No.
I did talk to Home Depot. They are required to give a certain amount to the community each month and each year. They give out like $50 certificates, nonprofits. I got on their list last week.
Okay.
Also, they try to about once a year pick a nonprofit where all the employees pay down and work.
Very nice. Yeah. I mean, it's community. What do you call that?
Community engagement.
Yeah.
So
So,
fingers crossed we can make that happen as well.
and I'm going to draw this if I can to kind of a point.
Yeah, I got it.
Where do
There's too
you
much.
think? Oh, I know it's so good.
So timeline.
Well, no, actually, I'm going to be more specific than
Please.
that. because this is the Tolkien Society.
Yes.
So I'm going to say, taking off my role playing hat and putting on just my Tolkien scholar kind of hat.
Yes.
I'm going to say, for someone who is deeply interested in Tolkien, what does the RPG Center provide,
Well,
or will it provide?
Yeah, it will have all of the Tolkien stuff that I have anyway, that we have, and all the game. Again, it is the RPG Center. It's about the history of role-playing game formats. But Tolkien is a key part of the evolution of role-playing games. And some of the evolution of Tolkien has been influenced by role-playing games, certainly in the movies and the pop culture. There's been a feedback. The main thing is for us is where we will move our Tolkien Society meetings to monthly, and we will do Tolkien. Assuming all goes well. My biggest struggle right now is trying to get insurance. Just getting insurance for the nonprofit and that ancient building property. No problem. Can't categorize role-playing games. We're all volunteer run. We don't have fees. It's an ancient building, and nobody wants insurance. And so we're having a real problem finding.
I've got a retired insurance guy that might be
Great. Anybody? I haven't given up. I've still got people working on it, but that's been the biggest obstacle.
Okay.
We can have you come visit, whatever, but we can't do activity till that insurance is in place.
So you can broadcast, but you can't make it public. Is that right?
We can't let the general public come in. Right? The
Right.
volunteer, our core
The
group,
volunteers
our
is okay.
core group, is helping stuff.
Right.
Is it like property insurance?
We need both property and liability. So we need
Okay.
property insurance and general. So it's triple net. Is terms. Basically, we're responsible for everything. So we have to have the property insured, our property insured, the stuff inside, and liability against anything happening. And we have to have a minimum of a couple $1 million protection standard. Problem is nobody wants. So we're still trying. We're working on that. But anyway, the plan is, if all goes well, by next month, this meeting down there, in the new setup upstairs. We already are broadcasting from there. The big table, as you see, is not here anymore. It's down there. So we started with Costco tables. So that's where, if all goes well, everybody 101 North Stone Street. Those of you online, it'll still be no different. Although we'll have faster internet connection. 1 gig down and 50. So we'll have.
Well, that'll be nice.
3 times the
for broadcasting.
And then if all goes well, Tolkien will be there, and the capacity is far more than my house. We won't be using the front building. That won't be safe for the public probably. So just be building. Our plan is the downstairs, the whole downstairs, we're taking out a wall, that whole 1,000 square foot area, most of it. Lots of that will have a gateway. And it's also fenced in, so the little kids are there. They can't run away very far, right? We've got multiple levels of security.
Yeah.
This is a community center.
You do, absolutely. Well, hey, kudos to you for your courage in taking this on, and I look forward to how it's going to take both RPG research, and your work to a new level, and also give you more opportunity at home to be able to use this for whatever you need.
Yeah. So rpgresearch.com/donate. We're going to have a wish list of specific items. People for that, so where they can just like Home Depot or something, just buy something for us, like air conditioning.
Yeah.
It's going to be. I'm going to loan all of my window ACs to that space to get by initially, but that's really inefficient. And anywho, so yeah, so that's we'll have more updates in the future.
So,
Moving on.
if you need a new charity of choice,
Yes,
look no further.
smile.amazon.com. You can select RPG Research, so that all the shopping you do, but you have to go to smile.amazon.com or doesn't count. You can pick RPG Space Research as your charity of choice.
Slow down, Hawk. Say it again.
Smile.amazon.com.
Yep.
And you choose your charity choice. RPG Space Research. And then a small percentage of all your shopping will be automatically donated to Amazon.
Yep.
So, for example, a year ago, that check was $40. recently just got one for about 100. The more people do it, the more it helps.
That's great.
Yeah.
Word out.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Hawk.
Thank
Thank
you.
For that update.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful. And now we open up to kind of recent things that are not part of our normal month-to-month routine that anybody wants to bring up. So I'm going to start with Anthony, and then we'll go to our online guests. Anthony, is there anything you wanted to bring up for discussion this month, related in some way to Tolkien?
Oh well, I managed to read Ursula K. Le Guin's first book of the series.
Well
And
done.
what did you think about that?
Oh, I thought it was awesome. Initially, I obviously I thought it was a little bit different from. I read the afterword of that book, and she marked that before Tolkien, fantasy, modern, it didn't exist. Like, Tolkien helped put modern fantasy mass market
Re-mythology.
yeah, mass market format, and I thought her work kind of focused on youth more, but obviously that's YA novel.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And yet you enjoyed it,
I did, yeah.
which kind of brings that whole question of marketing niches and ages.
And how that can unfortunately isolate things that couldn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I prefer to read books of any character.
Anything with genre is a problem. So, like my music, right? I have nearly 300 recorded music. And I'm now on all the streams except for
Pop jazz.
the streaming services.
Pandora. No,
Pandora. That's the only one I can't get into because they said explicitly I don't fit into one genre.
Oh, really?
Each of my pieces is multi-genre.
Yeah, because really
I mix things.
they profit best, I guess, when things are easily searchable
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
tags. that are-
Spotify I finally got into a few,
Yeah.
but Pandora, who humans go through it because they can't categorize it, won't accept any of my music because it's all cross genre.
which
They're like,
actually
submit
has
stuff that only fits in one genre. Please.
it actually
Like, I
has
don't
a
have it.
oh sorry yeah.
Yeah, no,
I mean it actually has a parallel with curating
right, exactly.
because I mean things and I don't think necessarily it's a problem with genres. This is my perspective. Okay? But I think what you need to have is you need to hold them loosely.
Well, but I mean that is a problem. So if you say like electronic music, that's very broad. Some people that means EDM, electronic dance music.
Yeah,
Other people that means trance. Other people it means experimental.
Yeah.
So then they
Or
create the
ambient,
subgenres and
right.
ambient, right? Or new age, right? It all gets
Yeah.
lumped together in the new age. My stuff has a little bit too much of a beat. So now what happens is on iTunes and Apple and all the others, Google, all the others, my stuff just shows up under all sorts of weird genres or other, and doesn't get a lot of eyeballs because of it, but it's out there. But it is a concern. Same thing with the book thing, right? When you categorize it, and then people say, "Well, I only watch fantasy or I only listen to country," things like that. They end up potentially missing out on a lot of cross pollination when it doesn't neatly fit in the box.
So,
Exactly.
Any comments from our online guests about Anthony's about Earthsea or about genres?
I think there's room for mixing two genres, especially in music. And I've seen it done. I mean, I lived on Okinawa for 38 years. And there was a gentleman who took Okinawan songs, old Okinawan songs, and converted them to a more modern type music.
That's
And
a lot
I
of
mean, I liked it, maybe traditionalists there didn't, but he was, I mean, Okinawans get along with anybody, but he was well liked on the island, and he kind of repopularized that among, folks in Asia.
Were you stationed in Okinawa?
Yeah, I was at first. I went in. I think I first came there in 1968 as a two-striper in the Air Force, and then basically homesteaded there. And then after I got out, I went to Guam for 2 years, and then I went back to Okinawa and worked for a private company, worked for Marine Corps, worked for the Air Force, and finally worked for the Army there. So, you know, it was a great place. That's where I met my current wife anyway. She was Air Force mechanic, and she's the technician in the family, and also IT in the family. And we hit it off, and we both had similar interests. And it was very interesting. The people are very decent, and they have to be to put up with us for as long as they have since 1945. But for the most part, everybody gets along there, and they're not as uptight as regular Japanese.
Wow. And Chris, you have a fair amount of knowledge of Japan. Had you lived there, did you say once?
Yeah, I lived there for a year. There certainly was. I was in a university setting, so I got to see a bit of cultural diversity.
Is that on Honshu or Hokkaido?
In Osaka, in Honshu,
Okay.
and there were university students from up north and university students from Wakayama was probably the craziest laid back attitude, and they liked to think of themselves as from the sticks, and there definitely was. I saw a lot of cultural diversity that I did not see in a whole bunch of other like my education, the literature. It was kind of nice, and then all the TV shows, all the real life ones were filmed in Osaka because they were more laid back and humorous, and all the news programs were filmed in Tokyo because they were uptight.
Yeah, I can confirm that because when I was on Guam, I was a tour guide for the Japanese for a local company, and it was funny because people like from Nagoya were certainly a lot easier to get along with, and as Chris says, Tokyo. I mean, those people are uptight. They leave, they lend new meaning to the word. So it's interesting though. There is diversity, even though it's a completely homogeneous society. That's not easy for me to say.
Right. Right. Interesting. Good. Okay. And so you read. I'm glad that our discussion inspired you to try to read more of these authors.
I did start reading C.J. Perry or Ashura.
Sure. We'll have to find out
Can I
next time.
interject something Tolkien related?
Well,
It is pronounced cherry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
What was
Yeah, I
it,
wanna-
Christina Tolkien?
Yeah. Yes. Please go ahead and share for those who don't know.
Can you folks hear me? I guess not.
Yes, we can hear you.
It
Yeah.
seems
Oh.
that the audio has
Yes, we
been-
can hear you. Sorry, I accidentally
Okay.
clicked the microphone. Sorry.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay, the lady, the lady from Italy, Sarah? Yeah, she had an interesting take when Tolkien's daughter passed away, and she said it was the last of the Numerians. That kind of hit me. So.
How did she say that was the last of the Numenorians? Was it kind of like that sense of the yeah? Talk about that a little bit.
Because it was Tolkien's immediate family, and it's like his grave, his tombstone. He's buried with Edith, and you have Baron and
Luthien.
Luthien.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then this is what she said. I think all his children have passed away. So,
Wow.
Anyway, it hit me. It really did.
Certainly is a kind of a, how would you describe that? It's a new era, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was saying this to my daughter. My oldest is she's deeply appreciates Tolkien's literature and is very knowledgeable about it. And so as we were reflecting on it together, we were kind of talking about how now that Priscilla has passed away and all of Tolkien's children are gone,
Still, I'm sorry, my mistake.
It's really, while he continues to have family members, of course, who are in a sense carrying the torch, grandchildren, etc.,
Mhm.
and of course even Christopher Tolkien's wife Bailey. It's, there's family members, but as it gets increasingly distant from Tolkien's own nuclear family, it is up to those, I think, or I'm going to suggest it is increasingly up to those who are here to
Continue
carry
the
on
legacy.
and continue the
Yeah.
legacy. I really do believe that. So I'm going to go ahead and post this as a, so this is something that Sarah put online, did she?
Yeah, she sent an email to,
Yeah, I sent you guys the email about
You
Priscilla
did.
passing.
You did. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Anthony.
welcome.
Yeah. So okay, I'll make sure to put that link to for both Priscilla passing away and then also the what Sarah wrote about it.
Yeah, the
So
last of
okay. Chris, any comments before we move on to talk about Rings of Power and then we need to get into our obviously our Tolkien letters and our discussion of Moorcock and Tolkien.
Pastor Doug Wilson says he will not be watching any of the Lord of the Rings stuff, the Amazon stuff, because
He's a pretty knowledgeable. He's a pastor, but he's also a
I
writer.
missed the name.
Doug Wilson from Moscow, Idaho.
Yeah, why not?
he he thinks it's too far afield from the original, which I'll argue that point. But he also countered his original observation by saying that it is an appropriate gateway drug to get people into the material. So
Yeah.
he wasn't all bad.
Well, I think Chris, you have opened the can of worms trademark.
Yeah.
So I'm putting that in the notes. Trademark can of worms. Let's go ahead and take some time. I'm going to allot, if you don't mind, I'm going to allot as secretary 15 minutes only to this discussion because I really want to make sure we hear from Tolkien himself, and I want to make sure that we get in a good discussion of
Let's do
Moorcock.
that. And if you don't mind, I'm going to be without audio running in the background of the construction of the place. Just something to see. while
That's
we're
fine.
discussing.
Sure, yeah.
Visual.
No worries. Yep. So
Go
Hawk's
ahead.
going to put some construction up there, and we're going to talk about faithful and unfaithful construction. Oh boy, yes. So Chris, you get the kind of first salvo here, or whatever. We've had a chance to kind of hopefully reflect a little bit. I mean, I know Hawk and I have been crazily busy, and there's been a lot going on, but I did get a chance to Gary. Just so you know, I did listen to the nerdrotic YouTube video that you sent me. Anyway, so Chris, you've had some time to think. You've obviously read what's out there in terms of what seems like. I'm going to put out there and say, would you say that there's three coalescing camps? One would be the Amazon juggernaut saying, "Hey guys, trust us. We really want to do a good job here, okay? We're not going to invest billions of dollars into, throw it away as garbage." And then you've got a camp that's like really big reaction against what's been given so far, which mostly is the trailer and then comments by the actors and comments by the producers, which is so there's been a big reaction against this whole kind of super fan, etc.
Yeah.
And then you've got then you got the Pollyannas like me who are like, there's got to be some middle ground. It can't be as bad as it all seems. So where do you land, Chris? Your turn.
So
Well, it's doing weird.
Well, can we turn off the sound?
Yeah.
I'm trying to. It wasn't letting me. Stop.
You want a j.r.r?
This might not work.
Yeah, it's weird. It's blanking. I wonder if YouTube has added a blocker.
okay, so
Yeah, let's
Go
let
ahead.
me see here.
I'll just leave the.
Yeah,
You guys back to hearing me again?
Yeah,
Yeah, we
sorry,
are,
we
sorry.
are. Apologies.
I
It's all
can't
you, Chris.
hear
Go for it.
Anyone?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm gonna start with the all the comments about get woke, go broke, and reactions against the super fans. There's a whole bunch of Tolkien purists who really hope that this does not go down the path of, for example, CBS's Star Trek Discovery, which I still watch. But their
Clarify that for those of us who haven't watched it.
wokeness is starting to intrude on the storyline
Okay.
in such a way
Chris?
that it's really not it's modern culture imposing itself on
Okay.
the literary work.
And that's what
And
you're
that-
saying Star Trek was doing with Discovery?
That is what has occurred in Star Trek Star Trek Discovery
Okay.
series.
Okay. And you're saying that's a parallel to what the potential danger is there.
What the super fans are seeming to indicate is that same thing is going to happen within the series.
That's a prediction, but not necessarily knowledge that we know for sure. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So one wonders how many hours of production meetings were spent on that topic.
Oh boy,
Just imagine.
the ratio thing, yeah. So
Yeah.
So you've got the super fans faction, and so you're saying that involves. So it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that represents 2 points that are trying to be brought across by that group, and you're saying this includes hardcore Tolkien fans, which I assume would not be just for books, but also would. It seems like that faction includes a lot of people who may know the books or may not have read them, but who also through Jackson's movies.
Yeah, we're fans we're Jackson purists as well as
Yeah, it's a thing.
It's a thing.
Yeah, totally.
It's a sick and wrong world.
They have there would be a group that have totally ignored the books and are Jackson purists and are probably have bought all the games and played them all the way through.
And then and then you also have people who are more book lovers, right? But there seems to be
Right.
a coalition, would you say? This is a coalition of maybe both?
No, I'm saying that they're pretty split because the Jackson people want to see a lot of action and the book people want to see a lot of story.
Stimmers versus
development.
storytellers.
Yeah, and it's hard to put Game of Thrones-esque gamified the film and get one of the outputs being character depth development.
Okay, so you're saying that the danger that is being feared
If you
is
go this route, you will pick off this other group.
okay, and then that would be to be not faithful to the. So again, just summarize that. It's really it's hitching Tolkien to a wagon that Tolkien never intended to communicate, and it's putting in today's concerns and agendas in a way that would be really not. It wouldn't necessarily fit.
And I'm going to separate out two agendas. One is the modern woke cultural agenda, and the other is the capitalist get squeeze every dollar you can out of it by gamifying the theory.
Okay, that's really helpful. I think Gary, you've been holding your tongue as a wise sage. Now, loose forth your word hoard and tell us how, over the last month, what your perspective is, and then we'll see what at the table what we think here.
Yeah.
Or as because we've mentioned Star Trek, don't mince words, Bones.
Yeah.
Tell us what you really think.
Oh, we can't hear you, Gary. Your microphone's muted.
You're muted, Gary. You're muted.
Uncancel yourself.
There you go.
Yeah, okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I was gonna say, nobody accused me of being sage before. I agree with Chris, except I was going to ask a question about, he divides Tolkien fans into Jackson and book groups, okay? And and the book groups are the biggest purists. However, I mean, it's like in the second Hobbit, they introduced Arya. She's not, it's not a Tolkien thing, but people were very upset about that. So is that like the delineation, Chris, you're talking about between the two groups?
Yeah, certainly adding characters that aren't there. Yeah, you have to take the literary license of cutting stuff out in movies
Yeah.
and
You can
books,
see,
and I can accept that.
you can see why Jackson did it.
Oh yeah, but adding too much extra creates lots of problems.
I agree with you there, and when you said that, there's Amazon, when they're having their production meetings, they spend probably a lot of time about this, and, getting back to I have similar views as Chris, and that is because, and I emailed back and forth with Brian about this. Was what they're doing, why are they doing it? That to preach to us about what one segment of our society thinks we should be like in the moral opinion in this age, or is it, basically true to Tolkien's vision, which was Northern German or Northern European mythos, which is what he did. So, and the example I used was, I think they have a black elf in this new series. Okay, Tolkien never did that. So what? But there's a bit of a controversy because he's one of his girlfriend or whatever is a human, white human. Now, what's the reason for doing that? Is it if it's following Tolkien, if it's following okay, if it's following Tolkien, it's because of
Halls of
the
Panders.
lifespans of elves versus humans. And, the same thing Elrond felt about his daughter with Aragorn. Or is it just because this figure is black and this is white, and it's something they want to introduce and make their statement, which is a political statement. Then it becomes a political thing, and I think that's wrong.
Okay.
So you see where I'm coming.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. Thank you. I want to get everybody's points of view here. Anthony, how do you see this in the last month? What have you read or seen? And
On the Amazon series?
just basically now that you've had some time to think about it, so far,
Yeah.
what's your perspective? I mean, because there's really two things we're talking about. One is what is the intention of Amazon Studios, and then what is the reaction out there, and what do you think about all this?
Yeah. Well, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic, and to be honest, excited for fantasy and Tolkien. Really. However, I do have an inherent distrust of major, uh, as well as some of the more toxic areas of the fan base. I don't really pay much attention to what goes on, even though I'm a millennial and grew up alongside the web. I try to stay away from all the excessive fan discussions because how much did they
Nerd
give?
rage.
Yeah, nerd rage.
It's true.
Yeah.
And how quick did that come out? I mean, it was like instant.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
Yeah.
But anyways, how much they only gave us what, a minute long trailer
Mhm.
and a couple of images, like teaser posters. So
Yep.
they haven't really given us that. How could we formulate all the opinions and judgments?
Which they had to know in some ways. I mean, part of it is the idea of a teaser trailer is not to give away everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is actually a really shrewd
Well,
capitalist
If
ploy.
you want to be literal about teaser, it's worked.
Well,
If people are talking about
I
it,
mean, if you want the beat to come
talk
after you,
about,
you
they
hit
talk
the.
about there's such thing as bad publicity.
Oh, I see what you mean, because it gets more
Controversy
people
is
watching it.
extra publicity.
Exactly. Yeah.
You get other people spreading the word about it that wouldn't have known about it otherwise.
Yes,
Yes.
there is that.
Yeah. Viral marketing.
And as far as it remaining, I think as long as it remains true to the spirit of Tolkien, work, even if it makes a few, adds a few extraneous elements or embellishments, it doesn't. As long as it doesn't stray too far from the plot and the spirit of Tolkien, then I'm excited to see what brought forth. I think that as compared to the first and third ages of Middle Earth, Tolkien didn't write a whole lot about the second age. What do we have to work off of?
One chapter.
Yeah, one chapter in the Silmarillion, the Tale of Years or something, and the appendices. Also, some of the finished tales like Eldarion and this
Right.
tales.
Right.
So again, we don't have a whole lot of source material compared to Hobbit, first Quintus
Right.
section. So I think there's a lot of there's definitely a lot of room for other minds that can again
Not other sledgehammers, though.
so to add more color and depth.
Yes.
to make-
Which I like. I like that's a great way to bring us back to the point there, Anthony. Because of many opinions, there is much. Well, I guess you could say virtual ink spilled right on this.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yes.
heat, but not necessarily a lot of light. And I think Hawk, and I'm going to kind of turn to you and ask you, but I think what's interesting that's been brought up so far by Chris, Gary, and Anthony is that there are some agendas that we have to be watching out for. Back in the Greek mythology, which growing up, let's bring in the mythology. I love Pillars of Hercules. As you enter and leave the Mediterranean Sea, really there was this two twin dangers, which kind of you had to steer clear of, and one were these rocks, and with this monster, and then there was also a whirlpool, and so I really feel like we do have always this danger with a creator, an author, an artist, and their what they've done. What do you think, Hawk? So far, again, we don't know everything. We do know some things. What's your analysis of where we're at this stage?
So one of the things we see have happen all the time is attitude that fans, and it goes multiple ways. Interesting to see how it gets. Um, so I remember there have been some authors who said, "Hey, wait a minute, this is my work,
Yeah.
not yours. Back off.
Yeah.
Let me do this. You know, you're welcome to your opinion, but you don't have a right to threaten me and tell me how it should be. You want suggestions, great, but people, again, nerd raging, will just get it, just absolutely, it goes far beyond, you know, enjoyable, scholastic, scholarly debate. That's redundant. Anyway,
Yeah. Friendly.
Disagreement of opinions and ideas. That's the inklings. The inklings disagreed with each other.
Yeah.
They liked things, didn't like things.
What was one of
Were
Tolkien's
critical.
one of Tolkien's friends? I think it was the Doctor who was like, "Oh no, not more of these
Yes.
elves."
Yes. And it was okay to be critical.
Yeah.
While respectful.
Yes.
And we
Wait,
completely
those two in the
lost
same sentence.
We've so lost the RESPCT across all of the different topics. Nobody seems to be able to have a conversation in a respectful way anymore for the last discussion. There isn't a concept of respect.
Yeah.
There is the assumption that people are always at their worst intentions, whether it's a corporation's worst intentions, whether it's an artist's worst intentions. People automatically are assuming the worst, not giving them the. Now, if they come out and say, as they did for Doctor Who, I mentioned that last time, we are doing it this way because this is the message we're trying to send. Okay, they made their point.
Yeah.
They've fallen on their sword about it, and you can now criticize whatever you disagree with about their decisions there, artistic choice. But if they say, well, we're trying to incorporate some modern ideas into this other thing and blah, 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 that's not the same thing as to say we have an agenda and we're trying to sell it. And what I'm seeing is an awful lot of assumptions. Yes, should be wary because of what we've seen happen with Wheel of Time and Doctor Who and these others. Alas and unfortunately, yes. But I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And as I said last time, I'll wait to see it. And then I will pick on the specific things that bother me, and I will try to give them the benefit of the doubt. And remember that it's always going to be, whenever you do an artistic interpretation of someone else's art, it's always going to be, it's not the original artist.
Exactly. Yeah.
The question is, are these people at least trying to be respectful of Tolkien and his works?
Yeah.
Or have they said, we are doing this? So there are people out there who consider Tolkien a horrible racist and Nordist and all of this stuff. And so they think all things Tolkien should be rejected, should be rewritten and changed.
Repurposed.
Yeah, repurposed to another, let's use the stories to try to make a different agenda. That's very, very different than to say, well, okay, we've got some modern sensibilities. There are things 100 years ago that we're not comfortable with now. And so we're going to modify it to our modern sensibilities, good or bad. Those things change, and make it more accessible to a younger audience, things like that. That I'm not going to automatically lambast any for that. If they do it well, so again, and I keep using the Doctor Who one because it has longevity, right? From 1961 on and off since
60
then.
years.
It has spanned more than any other television show, and it was intentionally trying to bring young folks into history and science and things about nonviolence and other things like that, right? Those were core themes of Doctor Who. And that was controversial compared to a lot of what. So, and has continued to be a controversial series. So, if it's all agenda based rather than story driven, yeah, it's going to be. But I want to give it the benefit of the doubt. And again, I want to give the opportunity, I want to respect the people who are working so hard on it. I've done a little bit of film and such, in a smaller scale with Zombie Orphans Entertainment and all that. And these people work so hard. They give their lives. And, it really, give them a chance, right?
That's
Don't
what I say.
automatically, and that's what really bothers me about people have seen 2 little tiny clips that don't tell you anything, and a few little releases, and there's this war already. I mean, talk about War of the Rings.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it really is. We're seeing on the internet just unbelievable amounts
Yeah.
of traffic, CPU cycles, and energy put into this before we have anything really tangible.
Oh, go ahead.
Do
So,
do you think the internet, online forums, media, and discussions have contributed?
well, okay, that's, I mean, there's a whole
It,
long
it has more to do just with the
bravery of the keyboard.
right, yeah. So it makes things more immediate, for good or bad. Well, I'm gonna have to bring
Yeah,
it.
people don't sit and stop and think
I
through
was
it
going to
first.
say something really
Yeah.
quick about what Hawk said, which is, I think people who are just complaining about, without seeing the product yet, just the trailer and the, and the interviews and Vanity Fair, that type of thing, is folks have been burned so many times by people in that profession pushing their agenda.
Sure.
So they automatically assume this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, we did it.
Assuming the worst.
Yeah, exactly. It's assuming the worst. It's the same
Yeah,
thing.
and
rather-
this is what's going on.
And you're right.
And as I've
There's always
Chris
been an
mentioned,
agenda. There's always
Star-
World War
the
II.
way
It
with
was
Star
all
Trek, you know, they've completely ruined it.
Yeah.
Is that
There-
going to happen to the Rings of Power?
yeah. We don't know. And
Okay.
there's always been an agenda. World War
Yeah.
II. It was all pro, American, what
Mhm.
have you,
Right.
etc.
Sure,
That-
and
that's
and
always been a
very
thing.
relevant right now. I have
Sure.
Ukrainian and Russian
Yeah,
students,
exactly.
and so how
Oh,
can I
yeah.
help them
Yeah.
to process these
Yeah.
things and say on the playground we just need to respect each other. And just because someone comes from a Russian background does
Yeah.
not mean they're a bad guy. So
Right.
Yeah.
we need to distinguish between governments and,
Yeah.
and individuals, etc. This is
Compassion.
yeah, absolutely. I think this is really good. Good discussion, good debate, good thoughts. And I think just in closing, I'll just say very briefly this. I think what it does is it brings, as it were, we're stirring the pot, and what rises to the top is a lot of strong feelings, and that really it comes up with the question of who speaks for the creative direction. If I watch some of the videos that are out there, like Gary referred to in your email, there's a lot of pushback, which is sympathetic to, because of that distrust, because of that fear and concern, and it doesn't make it easy when people who are not the producers but are influencers, or because I think an honest and yet compassionate view frame of mind would say, okay, people have real concerns that I want to listen to, but there's also real agendas, and that there are people who don't necessarily speak for the creative direction per se, but they really want it to be X, Y, or Z. And so we, of course, hope that, and again, it goes back to what is the spirit of Tolkien? How can, and this is something we don't have time for this time, but I think we should come back to it next month, I would suggest, is to return to this question, which is very relevant, of how it can be a good thing that Tolkien drew from the Northern European mythologies, and yet that this can be great story for people from all cultures all over the world, whether you're an Egyptian or
Applicability.
a Bolivian or white, black, whatever. Applicability to all of us. Why is it?
Yeah.
And I think that one thing that's been said very well is actually we don't need to make Tolkien more accessible, because he's
already there.
he's been
Yeah.
translated into
If they
over 30 languages.
if they try to make it direct allegory, then it will be very of the time and it will pass and not have a lot of legs. If
Right.
they go with applicability, it will have legs, timeless. And
Yeah. Plus, I think Tolkien's name versatile.
that-
Yeah, keep it universal.
Versatile.
I think
what
that's a
we're talking
great place to end it on.
okay.
Okay, so let's move on to letters. We'll just read one letter or part of a letter. It might be a long one. And then if we have time, I really would like to reserve that last half hour for a discussion of something Hawk brought up, which was Michael Moorcock and a New Yorker article that I did email to you. It's okay if you didn't have time to look at it, but he mentioned it last month. And I have found the essay by Moorcock, which is called...
That he lambasts Tolkien.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh yeah. No, he is not. He is very different than
It is
Tolkien.
called the Epic Pooh, which is...
Oh my god.
Oh, he's throwing it.
Well, the
throwing
thing is, he is appropriate to discuss in a Tolkien Society group because he was so motivated by Tolkien's works to write what he did.
It's
Even
true.
though it was to be the
It's
antithesis, he was driven to be the anti-Tolkien.
Moorcock shall prove to be but mine instrument.
Exactly.
Okay,
So,
let's
yeah, that'd be great.
let's pull out our copies of the letters of Tolkien.
Can you hand me mine?
Sure.
Right there?
And don't feel bad, Gary. I was talking to you about the beginning of the book, and then some family. We had some family tragedies going on and issues, and so I don't have a physical copy, so I'm ordering my Amazon copy today, Gary, because otherwise,
Smile@amazon.com.
yeah, smile, yes, because now I can donate to a charity.
Exactly.
But next month, Gary, please, you have the right to ask me, do you have your paper copy yet?
And RPG Research hosts the Tolkien Mood every year too. So if you don't donate to RPG Research, you're donating to Tolkien.
Nice.
Wonderful. Okay, so would you like to read that, Anthony?
Yeah, is it 199?
Letter 199, indeed.
Yes. All right, ready?
Yes.
Okay, this from a letter to Carolyn Everett, June 24th, 19. Though it is a great compliment, I am really rather sorry to find myself the subject of a thesis. I do not feel inclined to go into biographical. I doubt its relevance to criticism, certainly in any form less than biography, superior and excellent. I alone could. In which I do not. The chief biographical fact to me is the completion of the Lord of the Rings. Still astonishes me. A notorious beginner of enterprises and non-finisher, partly through lack of time, partly through lack of single-minded concentration, I still wonder how and why I managed to peg away at this year after year, often under real difficulty, to bring it to a conclusion. I suppose because from the beginning, it catch up in its narrative, visions, most of the things most repeated. I did not go to a public, to a great grammar school of ultimately medieval.
And that should just be clarified. When they say public school, what they mean is like private school. The meaning over there in England's different.
Yes, different.
It's the opposite. A public school means Eton.
Yes, Eton
or some kind of more elite school.
Yeah.
But he's saying I didn't go to that, but I did go to a really good old grammar school. Yep, there I am.
My experience had therefore nothing whatever in common with that of Mr. Lewis. I was at the one school from 1900 to 1911. One short interval. I was as happy or the reverse at school as anywhere else the faults. I ended up anyway as a perfectly respectable and tolerably successful senior. I do not dislike game, not compulsory, fortunately. I have always found cricket a bore, chiefly though because I was not good at it. I have not published any other short.
Or he didn't like to drink them.
I have not published any other short story but Leaf by Niggle. They do not arise in my mind. Leaf by Niggle arose suddenly and almost complete. It was written down almost at a sitting, very nearly in the form in which it now appears. Looking at it myself now from a distance, I should say that in addition to my tree love, originally called the tree, it arose from my own preoccupation with knowledge that it was finished in great detail or not at all, and fear near certain not at all. War had arisen to darken all horizon. No such analyses are a complete explanation even of a short story. I read the works of E.R. Edison long after this. I once met him. I heard him in Mr. Lewis's Magdalen College. Read aloud some parts of his works, or read aloud. From the Mistress of Mr. References to the passage of Scouring of the Shire, Book 6, Chapter 8, where Frodo, there is to be no slaying of hobbits, not even if they have gone over the other side. No hobbit has ever killed another purpose, and it is not to begin now. Nobody is to be killed at all. If it... And back to the body of text.
You did it extremely well. Be the fourth paragraph. Read the works of.
Oh, there it is. He did it extremely well. I read his works with great enjoyment for their sheer literary merit. My opinion of them is almost the same as that expressed by Mr. Lewis on 104 of the essays presented to Charles Williams. That footnote. I like or dislike his invented worlds. I myself like that of Worm or Bird. It's like that of. There's no quarrel between our two.
Wow.
Yes. Except
High
that
praise
I
from him.
disliked his character, as always excepting Bro, and despise what he appeared to admire more intensely than Lewis, at any rate saw fit to say of himself. Edison thought what I admire soft, his work, the contemplation. I thought that corrupted by an evil and indeed silly philosophy, he was coming to admire more and more arrogance and cruelty. Incidentally, I thought his nomenclature slipshod and often inept. In spite of all of which, I still think of him as the greatest and most convincing writer of the invented world. But he was certainly not an influence.
Okay, that's a good stopping spot. Before we read more, thank you, Anthony. There's a lot in there. Looking at the more.
All right, more.
Puppy.
Does anybody have any
Read more.
comments on the first
Being a little too pushy.
four
You wanna go potty?
paragraphs here?
Thank you.
Yeah.
The idea that he can praise someone's ability to be convincing and of invented worlds, and yet not like the nature of his writing, his nomenclature, shows a bit of depth that this culture does not have. That you can criticize an aspect of the work without criticizing the whole work is good. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think in that situation, sort of have your cake and eat it too. Affect the author, but criticize the work a little. Find some nuance that is kind of lost. So, I looked up E.R. Edison. He was an English civil servant and author writing epic fantasy novels. E.R. Edison. Notable works: Worm or Bird. The Amvian trilogy.
I feel like I've read something by Edison, but I can't remember what. Maybe I'm thinking of Harlan Edison.
Harlan Ellison.
Did you write the Invisible Man?
Oh, that's Ralph Ellison.
Ralph Ellison.
Yeah, my dad teaches.
Okay, wrong one. Okay.
But anyway.
So this is E.R. Edison.
E.R. Edison.
Has anybody ever read The Worm Ouroboros? And that's a reference, isn't it, to Greek mythology?
I think it was Scandinavian mythology.
They both.
The worm eating itself.
The world worm actually turns up earlier than Nordic mythology. Well, I mean, if you compare, I don't know how far back that goes. It could be Proto-Germanic, for all I know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Indo-European. There's an interesting question. It'd be worthwhile doing a little research on this. But I thought that Ouroboros is Greek. Somebody check on that. Yeah. Anyway, while we're looking that up, I think it's interesting how he says that Edison is not an influence on him on the Lord of the Rings, for example, which maybe it was being suggested to Caroline Everett. Okay, so he's writing about a thesis. So I'm not sure, but I think this is the first time that he's actually writing to someone who is doing a master's thesis on his work. Do you? Well, you know what? We could just search for the word thesis and see which. I'll do that. I'll look and see if it pops up earlier. But I have a feeling that this is the earliest that we see that.
Shows up in Egyptian iconic
Oh,
iconic
the
IP.
Ouroboros. So I guess the Ouroboros is Egyptian. They
Interesting.
got,
But it was also widely used by the Greeks.
But it was the idea of a serpent encircling the world. Is that correct?
And eating its own tail.
And eating its hotel. Yeah, I thought so. So it is not only a Northern European with what is it? Nidgar? No. Nid. Ooh. The serpent's name. Anyway, the one that's gnawing at the roots of Yggdrasil. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Anthony, for looking that up.
Nidhogg,
Nidhogg, thank you.
dragon who gnaws at the root world tree.
Supposed to be a big dragon or a serpent or not? Maybe I'm wrong.
But there was a lot of mixture.
Yeah, this comes to where Egypt had it as a snake, but then when
There's
it
pros
came
and
up Nordic, they added wings.
Kind of like Balrogs. Let's not get onto that again. Okay. Well, if there's no other comments, carry on, Anthony. We'll see if we can. This may be
Usually
too long.
reader. Long one.
Yeah, let's rotate. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
yeah, sure.
Who would like to read the next section? Hawk, are you up for it?
Sure.
Okay,
Professor
I've got a good voice for.
We leave it at, not, but he was certainly not influenced.
Yes.
The general idea of The Lord of the Rings was certainly in my mind from an early stage. That is, from the first draft of Book 1, Chapter 2, written in the 1900s. From time to time, I made rough sketches or synopses of books to follow immediately or far ahead. But these were seldom of much use. The story unfolded itself as it. The tying up was achieved, so far as it is achieved, by constant rewriting backward. I had a many-columned calendar, dates, and a brief statement where all the major actors or groups were on each day and what they did. The last volume was naturally the most difficult, since by that time I had accumulated a large number of narrative dates and set some awkward problems of presentation in drawing together the separate threads. By the way, that's also a software term,
Is it?
especially in agile methodology. Technology debts, your debts. There's all these things you want to put into your project only 6 months, let's say. And all these, and as timelines get pushed, set to the side, the backlog is all that methodology, just a waterfall methodology.
Yeah.
But and so you build up what's known as tech data. It's interesting, the narrative. It's the same thing because software development, that kind of narrative. But the problem was not so much what happened, about which I was only occasionally in doubt, though praised for invention. I have not, in fact, any conscious memory of sitting down and deliberately thinking out any episode as how to order the account of it. The solution is imperfect. Obviously, the chief problem of the sort is how to bring up Aragorn unexpectedly, and yet inform readers of what he had been up to. Told in full in its proper place, Volume 3, Chapter 2, though it would be better for the episode destroyed Chapter 6. Told in full, or indeed in part, in retrospect, would be out of date and told of action.
Right. We're speaking here about how Aragorn comes from the paths of the dead, is able to. What was he up to? You know, I mean, if you tell, oh, I'm defeating the coursers of Umbar, and now I'm sailing up the ship. Oh, look, there's Minas Tirith. That would have destroyed
the suspense.
So
saving the day.
Yes, the black sails.
Yeah.
Yes, but
you
then
don't realize
he
it's
unfurls.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that moment. I love that moment.
It completely changes the.
It's the catastrophe. He doesn't want to give it away, right?
Yeah. The solution, imperfect, was to cut down the whole episode, which in full would belong rather to a saga of Aragorn, Arathorn's son, than story, and tell the ending of it briefly during the inevitable pause after the Battle of Pelennor. I was, in fact, longest held up by exterior circumstances as well as interior, at the point now represented by the last words of Book 3, reached about After that, chapter 1, book 5, remained very long as a mere opening as far as the arrival of Gondor. Chapter 2 did not exist, and chapter 3, Mr. Rohan, had got no further than the arrival of Harrowday. Chapter 1 of book 4 had hardly got beyond Sam's opening words. Some parts of the Frodo and Sam on the confines of Mordor and in it had been written, but were eventually.
So this is really interesting because
Yeah.
you're seeing him describe his process.
Yep.
And he's writing these two stories really simultaneously. And then, of course, in the book, we have to go back and forth between what Frodo and Sam are doing and what's going on elsewhere in Middle Earth. So really interesting. Yeah. He's in the weeds, but I mean, this is obviously pretty interesting, and it does tell us a lot about his process.
This the last sentence. Interesting. Some parts of confines of Mordor. I
Oh,
wonder if those survive.
yeah.
The history of the history of the series.
Maybe I have haven't installed.
Yes, the annotated
versions.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be it. Probably down.
No, they're top right hand there.
Oh, the black ones. Yeah, I don't think you can get to.
I want to mess with.
That would be both
Electricity.
waterfall and agile. Waterfall of books, agile as you try to avoid them.
Yeah, Jesus, it's like a landmine.
But we'll make a note of that. Let's look that up next session.
Okay.
Let's take a look at that.
Note.
Yeah, because I know that Tolkien wrote
'Cause I can dig them out there.
Tolkien wrote an epilogue to the whole book. And daughter.
Which wasn't there an animated or radio version that does exactly that?
I don't know.
There was something I saw or heard, because sometimes if I hear it, my imagination fills in the blanks, and it was actually audio, but I have a visualization of it. But there is a version where Sam is telling story, the beginning. Open it. Was that the old version?
I've never.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, there's a version of it that starts
Where he's
with
talking
that
to
epilogue.
Eleanor.
Yeah, that's
Maybe.
exactly what Tolkien wrote.
Well, because he finishes the Red Book of Westmarch,
Yeah.
so that it's kind of that.
So that was the opening of this scene.
Yeah.
Really?
And I can't remember if it was the BBC one or something else. There is a version of that where actors are acting the voices out.
Yeah, I just love how in Tolkien, and of course it's not unique to just him, but when you can have these kind of Russian dolls, as it were, you have the storyline, and then you have this, and I can't remember what the term is, but it has to do with where you create the sense of how this book came to be.
Yeah.
And so the Red Book of Westmarch is kind of like the source material for Lord of the Rings, and it's been put together later on, so to speak, but it really did kind of comes from these, people or whatever. And then, anyway, so great. Hey, I think we have a little time, if that's okay with everyone. Let's and this is probably about as much time as we want to really get into it. There's a lot here one could do.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to if I may, just read a little bit, and then let's just kind of go around a little bit and discuss this. But there's kind of a deep dive, and we might have to just do this on our own to whatever extent you're interested. I put in the notes the New Yorker article, and then I also sent a chaser email today with Moorcock's essay, which is what I'm going to be reading from, because it's Epic Pooh. It's actually his own. I mean, I think what the New Yorker article is very helpful about is that which Hawk referred to. It does tell us kind of from another point of somebody else kind of saying, okay, so how do we look at Moorcock? How do we look at Tolkien? What influence was there? How did he kind of see himself and his kind of mandate of saying why do we really want to kind of, as it were, stay in Tolkien's shadow? And this was kind of lightly touched on when we started off with Brendan Sanderson.
Yes.
And he talked about this question of, is it really, and I think he did a more sympathetic treatment where I think Sanderson was saying, in a nutshell, the best thing to do is, and the best tribute to Tolkien is actually to do what Tolkien did, which is to go back to the original sources, mythological sources, and then
And
come up
make
with
your
your
own spin.
own story,
Yeah.
rather than kind of constantly being like,
Lifting from the same.
yes,
Yeah.
owing this huge debt
Yeah.
and trying to follow
Yeah.
Tolkien. So it's really this kind of response to this. So that's where he's writing out of. I'm going to read briefly just from here, and then I'll stop. He quotes, he's cheeky. Moorcock is very smart, but he's very cheeky. He's going to read. He's quoting from Clydas Kilby, who I actually knew a student of Kilby's, who's now in her 80s, and she lives in Washington State. Her name is Lucy Shaw. She's a poet.
Moorcock's still alive. He's 82.
Yes,
Holy crap.
and
He was
so
born in
really Kilby, I think, was great writer, and he was a professor at Wheaton College. Here's what he writes: "Why is The Rings being widely read today? At a time when perhaps the world was never more in need of authentic experience, this story seems to provide a pattern of it. A businessman in Oxford told me that when tired or out of sorts, he went to The Rings for restoration. Lewis and various other critics believe that no book is more relevant to the human situation. W.H. Auden says that it holds up the mirror to the only nature we know, our own. As for myself, I was rereading The Rings at a time of Winston Churchill's funeral, and I felt a distinct parallel between the two. For a few short hours, the trivia which normally absorbs us was suspended, and people experienced in common the meaning of leadership, greatness, valor, time redolent of timelessness and common traits. Men became temporarily human and felt the life within them and about. Their corporate life lived for a little and made possible the sign of renewal after a realization such as occurs only once or twice in a lifetime."
What year was this?
He wrote this in 1969
Okay.
in Shadows of Imagination, and my book here he wrote in the 70s after 1976. This is when he spent time. Kilby actually spent a summer interning for Tolkien.
Interesting.
And these are all things we want to have in the.
For a century at least, the world has been increasingly demythologized, but such a condition is apparently alien to the real nature of men. Now comes a writer such as John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, and as re-mythologizer strangely warms our souls. Clydas Kilby, meaning in The Lord of the Rings, Shadows of Imagination, 1969. Now, contra that, Michael Moorcock says, "I've sometimes wondered how much the advent of steam influenced Victorian ballad poetry and romantic prose. Reading Dunsany, for instance, or Dunsany, it often occurs to me that his early stories were all written during train journeys. Up from the platform and onto the train got Welleran, Rollery, and young Irene, forgetful of sex and income tax, were Surinard, Mamalek, Akanax, and in their dreams Dunsany's lord mislaid the communication cord. The sort of prose most often identified with high fantasy is the prose of the nursery room. It is a lullaby. It is meant to soothe and console. It is mouth music. It is frequently enjoyed not for its tensions, but for its lack of tensions. It coddles. It makes friends with you. It tells you comforting lies. It is soft. One day, when the sun had come back over the forest, bringing with it the scent of May, and all the streams of the forest were tinkling happily to find themselves their
Pretty shape.
the green pretty shape again.
And the little pools lay dreaming of the life they had seen, big things they had done.
Thank you.
And in the warmth and quiet of the forest, the cuckoo was trying over his voice carefully and listening to see if he liked it. Wood pigeon complaining gently, in a lazy, comfortable way that it was other fellows, but it didn't matter very much. On such a day as this, Christopher Robin, special way had howled 100-acre wood to see what.
It is the predominant tone of The Lord of the Rings and Watership Down, and it is the main reason why these books, like so many similar ones in the past, are successful. It is the tone of many forgotten British and American bestsellers, well-remembered children's books like The Wind in the Willows. You often hear it in regional fiction addressed to a local audience, or in a more sophisticated form, James Barrie, Dear Brutus, Mary Rose, and of course Peter Pan. Unlike the tone of E. Nesbit, Five Children and It, etc., Richmond Crompton, the William Books, Terry Pratchett, or the redoubtable J.K. Rowling, it is sentimental, slightly distanced, often wistful, a trifle retrospective. It contains little wit and much whimsy. Humor is often unconscious because, as with Tolkien, the authors take words seriously but without pleasure. One summer's evening, an astonishing piece of news reached the Ivy Bush, blah, blah, blah.
I would strongly disagree with you
Yeah,
without
that last
pleasure.
one.
Ooh,
I
tell us more.
strongly disagree.
Me
Tolkien
too.
Tolkien was driven by the pleasure of words.
That was his
As
whole
a
career.
philologist, that was his passion. Language and words were what he loved and gave him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He sometimes wrestled with words and stories, but that was what he savored. That was great joy for him.
I often find these so-called critics often
But
misunderstand.
the rest of it, I thought was really. Moorcock. I've read a lot of Moorcock stuff, especially.
One moment.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Just finish your thought, please.
Oh well, I often find some critics often have.
I don't think that's the case with Moorcock.
Yeah, I don't think it's the case with
Yeah.
Moorcock.
So tell us, you read the most here, I think. Aside from
I mean,
Hawk,
I've
has
read-
anybody
I've read-
else read any Moorcock? Anybody?
I think I'm the only one.
So tell us what you know.
So
Hawk.
I mean, I've read two major branches, the story, which are actually all part of the Eternal Champion. But
Elric.
Elric is one, and then the other ones I'd have to go grab them.
Yeah.
They're all basically different branches of the Eternal Champion. So his idea is it's kind of follows the Steve Campbell thing of that there's one hero that throughout all the ages comes through in time of need, whatever universe, and he's very much a multiverse person, and so they're all incarnations of the same great hero in different facets of the multiverse. And they sometimes in his books actually all come together. So at one point, one of the threads, he had 4 or 5 of his heroes in the same story. They're all in a boat in the mists coming together for this ultimate to overcome, because no one of them can overcome this challenge. And he was less about good versus evil per se in the Elric series and more about law versus chaos. That law was more stagnation and chaos was chaos. And the problem was with either extreme, nothing could survive. And actually, you see that in Babylon 5, as Warlords in the Shadows.
It also in the philosopher.
Yeah.
He wrote about the Apollonian and Dionysius.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So,
life.
yeah, exactly. And so with Elric especially, because it's the ultimate anti, the main character is the last emperor of a dying empire of really evil. They've gone inward because they're so they dominated the world and now they don't care anymore and now they're looking inward and all they care about is entertaining themselves. And for example, for music, for entertainment, they have a whole bunch of slaves with slaves' voice tuned to one note as a choir, and then the conductor makes them sing with each one note from that human voice. I mean, these are not good guys. And Elric is also happens to be an albino, and has
Drug addict, right?
Well, he has to take drugs so the weakness of his blood is the constant theme. And remember, these are all short stories. Michael Moorcock writes a lot of short stories. And what's interesting about with the Elric is he wrote 2. Started with the introduction of it, the first adventure, and then the second one back in. And then the first one he introduces it, and the second one he kills him. But there's a huge time gap in between. So then as the years progressed, he's released more short stories and comics and others, filling in the gaps in between. So you already know his beginning and his end, and he's still to this day, because he's still writing to this day, is still releasing more short stories. Now, the only problem I have with the short stories is he uses the same adjectives for each thing over and over. So his milky white hair, his milky white. It's like if you read them
Attention
back
to words.
so
perhaps?
if you binge read Elric, it gets frustrating. He keeps using the same adjectives. There was a version back in the 80s when I was part of a book club that he did a special edited version where he took out all that redundancy and made it a 2 novels that were like 3 or 4 episodes, books in each novel, and it made a complete novel series. And it arced nicely. You didn't have to go through all the repeated adjectives. That was the best version I ever read of Elric, because as far as the launch. But he ends up getting a demon sword, and this sword is intelligent.
Stormbringer.
Yes, Stormbringer. And the sword is an intelligent, which many songs have been written about to this day. Many rock bands have written songs about it. And the sword is intelligent, controlled by a demon, and Elric is basically a cursed anti-hero. He doesn't want to be a hero at all. He doesn't care. He's very selfish. But he is deposed of his throne by his cousin who kills his love and all this stuff. Well,
Good story
makes him
stuff.
actually do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Big Greek tragedy stuff. And so he's on the run and he makes friends against. He doesn't want to make friends. He's like, stay away from me. I'm cursed. I'm dangerous. He ends up one by one always killing his friends. The sword basically ends up, it sucks the souls out of people it attacks, which powers him up, makes him stronger temporarily, but it always turns on him. And one by one he kills each of his best friends or loves.
Oh,
as
a
the
little bit
stories
of
progress.
Turin Turin.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
very tragic.
Yeah, Girthang.
Totally tragic. Over and over and over again, it does this. And spoilers? Do you guys want spoilers for the end? Okay. Eventually, the sword literally goes up in the air and comes plummeting down and kills him and sucks his soul out of him.
Yeah, doesn't Turin kill him?
Yeah.
Yeah,
After
the
the
sword
sword
does.
says, "I will gladly
Yes.
drink your blood."
Yes, exactly. And there's very much echoes of that. So and so you could definitely make some Turin to Bar parallel or Calervo. And yet, as the character, you end up like it. Stories are intriguing enough. You keep reading them; they're interesting, etc. But it is dark fantasy, right? This is not the light, frivolous stuff. And in many of his books, there's a lot of that. So the multiverse is very present, and there's a lot more of that darkness, right? And again, he's not trying to be a little frivolous, little Hobbit Shire fantasy stuff that he was poking fun at there. He definitely does not go in that direction. So those are some key highlights that come to mind.
Yeah, just to add to what Hawk said, it's interesting. And again, I haven't seen a second source to confirm these things, but it just quotes on Wikipedia. It says that Moorcock's works are noted for their political nature and content. In one interview, he states, "I am an anarchist and a pragmatist. My moral philosophical position is that of an anarchist." In describing how his writings relate to his political philosophy, Moorcock says, "My books frequently deal with aristocratic heroes, gods, and so forth. All of them end on a note which often states quite directly that one should serve neither gods nor masters, but become one's own master." Besides using fiction to explore his politics, Moorcock also engages in political activism, some of which is helpful towards women not being objectified, but some of it would be much more in line with what we were discussing earlier in the debate about how Amazon should render Middle Earth, and I think it'd be much more about changing that.
And he is his worst. He is the like Tolkien by passing could no longer keep changing the canon. Moorcock regularly changes his own canon.
Oh,
So he is prone to revising his existing work with the result that different editions of a given book may contain significant variation. The changes range from simple settings, the Elric story, the Flamebringers became the Caravan of Forgotten Dreams in the 1990s, Victor Gallant's White Wolf omnibus editions, to character name changes, such as Detective Minos Aquilanus becoming first Minos von Beck and later Sam Begg in 3 different versions of the short story, The Pleasure Garden of Philippe Sagittarius. Major textual alterations, for example, the addition of several new chapters to The Steel Czar in the omnibus editions, and even complete restructurings, as with the 1960 novella Behold the Man being expanded to novel length and into a novel rather than an SF story recreated from the original version that appeared in New Worlds for republication as a book in 1969 by Alison Busby. He got rid of the sci-fi thing and went with just more. I mean, he does. So he just talk about niggling and rewriting.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Any last comments on Moorcock from what you've heard? I mean, I just want to say one quick thing here to let
Please.
people know. Of all of our different authors that we've mentioned that are living or have lived in the last late 20th century, Moorcock met both Tolkien and Lewis.
Wow.
So he actually had some contact with them initially when he was a young man. So just put that out there.
You want me to read from the New Yorker thing?
Well, no, I think
Okay.
we don't have enough time.
Okay, that's
I would really, I think there's
Sure,
more
if they
to
have
come
input,
back to
that'd be
next
great.
month,
Sure.
maybe. Gary, Chris, or Anthony, any comments?
This is Gary. All new and very strange to me because I haven't read any. I'm not sure that I like his drift.
No, I get you.
We'll see. I'll read the New Yorker article. I didn't have time to read.
That's fine. Chris?
No comments this time.
What about Fritz Lieber?
What's kind of
Uh,
about the same time as Tolkien?
So we going to get
Well, I'd like to transition soon,
Yeah.
but I want to wait till Hawk. Yay or nay on Shira.
yeah, because I've been.
And that
Yeah,
might be
I
something
want
we come
to.
back to in the future.
Yeah, we may have to come back.
And that might be,
Just-
yeah.
Fritz Lieber was born 19,
Okay.
lived 19.
Oh, interesting. So, yeah, I
So,
mean, he
that
would be,
another.
he might be a great kind of hinge between the more recent and contemporaries, because both.
Yeah, he was heavily influenced by H.P. Lovecraft, Robert Greaves, John Webster, and Shakespeare in the first 2 decades of his career. Beginning in the late 1950s, he increasingly influenced by the works of Carl Jung, particularly concepts of anima and the shadow. 1960s, he began incorporating elements of Joseph Campbell's The Hero of a Thousand Faces. I have the whole right up there.
Right.
These concepts are mentioned in his stories, especially the anima, which blah. He liked cats. They're featured in many of his stories. Tigerishka, for example, a cat like blah.
Well, we'll save a lot of. I'm
yeah.
good with it. I'm good. And
So-
actually, Moorcock refers to
Yeah, no,
Lieber.
they're kind of roughly peers.
Yeah,
So
he references Lieber in his essay, which I would encourage you to still read, because I'm going to say, just in my last comments on Moorcock, that an issue that it's brought up there, and also we referenced this earlier with the Rings of Power, and I'd like to come back to it next month if it's okay, is to talk more about the whole, is having a Nordic, or really they wouldn't even have said that way. I think they would have said Northern. That's how they would have expressed it. Northern mythological inspiration. How is that not racist? But instead, really when you look at how there's this great well, they're pulling from this well, and then how do you then write in your time period in a way that is, as we said, universal? So I think what's really fascinating that well is he pulled from this well, and then he shared that, as it were, like ent draft, where we drink from it, we can grow from it, taller, but it's not, we're not ents. You know what I mean?
and direct link to Tolkien.
Yeah.
Lieber was named the second Gandalf Grandmaster of Fantasy by participants in the 1975 World Science Fiction Convention, which I'm on. After the posthumous inaugural award to j.r.r. Tolkien. So he was right after Tolkien, given that second award. Next year, he won the World Fantasy Award for Life Achievement. He was guest of honor to the 79 World Con in England. Science Fiction Writers America made Grandmaster, inaugural winner of the Bram Stoker Award for Life Achievement in '88. Science Fiction Fantasy Hall of Fame inducted him in 2001. It's sixth class of 2 deceased living writers.
Okay.
Founding member of So anyway, it seems like a good tie-in.
So
a little more Moorcock,
Yep.
and then some
Yeah.
Fritz Lieber.
Focus on
I don't
Fritz
know.
Lieber, but we'll kind
Sure,
of pick up what we maybe gleaned from Moorcock and this.
And if I can get a breather, I will try to reach out.
Sure, for sure. And kind of why Northern mythology, the good things there versus how racism and activism fails to interpret Tolkien correctly. That kind of postmodern view. So we can talk about that, because
You see everything
obviously
through a narrow lens.
there are also fascist, racist versions, such as Tolkien's classic letter to the German publisher of the Lord of the Rings,
Yeah, I've read
He let them have it.
which is also worth reading. But both sides, whether it be fascist or kind of trendy wokeness, both sides fail to understand Tolkien. So let's dig into those Northern European myths and have some fun next month. Until then, last comments from everybody. Anything to say before we end?
With the whole bravery of the keep and comments, that is one thing that's lost with writing. You even see it with Tolkien paths, where sometimes in the moment say very huge things, but upon further reflection, you might take a kinder, more respectful approach to still being critical and disagreeing and such, but treating each other with compassion and respect. Just a reminder, as heated as people get about nerd rages and such, maybe take a little time to stop and write it up as an essay. It doesn't have to be handwritten, typed, whatever. Write up your thoughts first as a paper before you post. And that maybe would make for a much nicer place. And you might be able to publish a bunch of stuff, because that's how some of my stuff's. Somebody said some controversial stuff, and instead of responding right away, I wrote it down and calm the pathos and use more ethos and logos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here, here.
Or using more of your frontal lobe.
Yes. Yes.
Your
Your
limbic system.
Your frontal cortex.
And on that note, Chris.
Or be excellent.
Yes, exactly. Chris, Gary, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your joining us, and please come back if you can on April 19, which will be our next.
And hopefully at the new RPG Center.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hopefully.
It should be.
Indeed.
The only thing that would stop us would be insurance. We're
Cross my
ready
finger.
otherwise.
Don't
So
stop.
plan on it. So 101 North Stone Street, if you're in town at all, that's where it will be.
Okay, excellent. All right, live long and prosper.
Namarie!
That it may be well, and the Marie.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
I've got to die.